Hey there, fellow patriots. Welcome back to Patriots of the American Republic. Did a video a couple of days ago. Actually, I was invited to a friend of show, Osiris, Stuck in the Middle, and I basically reposted it on our channel because it was a good discussion based on the events that were going on. So in this video, I'm going to continue digging a little bit deeper into the things that are going on. I've titled this particular episode, disaster, foreign policy disaster. So, many of you know, the turmoil in Israel has been going on for a little over a week now. We're entering the second week. I don't intend to be partisan, but I am, in the sense that I do support Israel. Why? Because, obviously I explained it in the prior video, right? I'm pro-Israel for the sense that I am a Christian, and my God is Jew, is from Israel, right? When you look at the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament, right? The land of Israel, it belongs to the Jews. So that's where I stand, and what I'm going to do is I'm never going to lie to the audience. I'm never going to be deceptive. Even when I support something, I'm always going to do the truthful, the good and the bad, right? So that's where I kind of want to start off. But the reason why I'm starting off, and I didn't want to say that I'm being partisan here, is I don't, the reality is that weakness from this current administration is on full display on a global scale, right? Despite however you may feel, or anybody may feel about the Trump administration, one thing is for sure: our enemies did not attack our allies. They were hesitant to attack our allies, right? Russia did not attack Ukraine, nor was Israel getting attacked by Hamas during the Trump administration. This is Hamas's second attack since the Biden administration took over, if I'm not mistaken, and it's roughly their sixth attack under Democratic leadership, here in the U.S., right? So ever since Hamas came into power in 2006, right, they attacked 2008, 2009. They attacked 2011, 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Then they took a little bit of a break and attacked again in 2021, and here we are, 2023. They're once again going at it. So I'm a person who believes in the Reagan philosophy of peace through strength, right? Your allies have to respect you, but your enemies have to fear you. And it seems abundantly clear that our enemies really just don't fear us when Democrats are in the White House. The frail Biden and his weakness is on full display, and the sharks of the world know it. You got China acting up, you got North Korea acting up, you've got Iran acting up, you've got many different bad actors out there acting up. I mean, heck, we've got that within our own country where crime is up. It's due to the fact that we've got an open border, and we've got convicted criminals coming over the border, right? I mean, we talked about it, a couple of episodes ago, where Venezuela was opening up their jails and allowing their inmates to go, and as long as they agreed to come over here, right? Which was a Cuban tactic from the Castro regime. So we literally have criminals coming over the border. Not everybody's a criminal. Please don't misunderstand that. But this particular group of people actually, they actually are. And so they come here, they commit crimes. Heck, we've got our own American citizens, right? We got BLM and their, Summer of Peace and all the things that went on there. So we've got crime in our own situation, in our own country. And it's been emboldened by movements like the Defund the Police movement. And we've got, people who are unwilling to prosecute. You got, state attorneys who are unwilling to prosecute, let people go, minimize the penalties based on whatever narratives, people of color, and so on and so forth, right? I'm sure a lot of you guys know. But let's get into the nitty gritty here. the Hamas and Israeli war. There's so much information coming out of here. I'm not going to try and flood you with information. What I'm trying to do is dig a little bit deeper and try and give you a little bit more understanding that I didn't cover in the last one, recapping some of the things that I did in the last video, but giving you a little bit more substance, digging a little bit deeper, and also dismissing or dispelling the tactics from the left that I touched on in the prior video. So let's go ahead and get into it. On October 5th, you guys all know, I think it was October 5th. Now, see, I'm even confused here. No, actually, it was October the 7th. October the 7th, Hamas launches over like 5,000 rockets into Israel. Missiles, right? They managed to power glide into Israel and attack a concert of peace, right? They opened fire, killed and kidnapped many civilians. Reports also showed that they managed to hit small villages known as kibbutz and take hostages, kill families, elderly people, and even children. Israeli forces report they have found the bodies of dead babies, decapitated babies, and even burnt babies. So let's actually take a look at that, because this is really important. One of these videos, I'm only going to play one of these videos. I have two lined up, but I want to play this first one. Why is it important? Because there's going to be a lot of misinformation, a lot of propaganda, a lot of denial, which we saw the last time they attacked back in like 2014 during the Obama administration. There was a lot of, no, we're not doing that. And it turned out that they were. So let's go ahead and get into our first video here.
They're still finding the bodies of the victims of the Hamas attack over a week ago. The Zaka organization that retrieves the remains of the dead say the latest person to be found at the Kfar Azar kibbutz had been beheaded. Yossi Landau is the boss. 33 years he's volunteered for Zaka all over the world. He's never seen anything like this. The sheer brutality of Hamas has stunned his entire team.
But in Kfar Aza and Be'eri, we're talking about a total of, I would say, about 280 bodies, 280 casualties. I would say 80% was tortured. 80% of it was tortured. And you're talking children, adults, children, when you're talking a pile, two piles, you found them in Be'eri, two piles of 10 children each were tied to the back, burned to death. This is something behind, this is next level. And
I mean, it's actually indescribable, really. It's indescribable, really.
It's indescribable, and I won't describe everything that I saw.
So, tragic story from an actual witness, right, that was dealing with this. As you can see, he was emotional. I've seen other videos from other Israeli soldiers also confirming it. I've also seen it from a lieutenant, if I'm not mistaken, a lieutenant colonel or something like that, confirming what they saw, right? Some of the Israeli soldiers were pulled over. They were crying. They needed help. They needed, some type of comfort, because I can imagine it's hard to see a dead body, but to see babies and stuff like that, and the way that they were describing it, it's pretty graphic, right? And it's something that's, you don't need to have in your head, and then once you see it, it's hard to get out. So I feel for those soldiers, as well as the families, as well as the victims. It's nothing good all around. But like I stated in my previous video, where does this all stem from, right? We touched on it in the last video, right? And, the left just loves to pick and choose World War I or World War II as their starting point. As a matter of fact, I saw this video where it talked about Zionist colonists and how they invaded the area back in like 1919 or something like that, right? Again, going back to the times of World War I, around there, as their starting point, and to show that there's an extremist. Because remember, these, just like BLM, just like Antifa and all that other stuff, what they're trying to do is they're trying to throw shade on reality. They're trying to actually change history, right? But and that's all to fix their narrative, right? That's the narrative that they want to portray, that this was Palestine, it's always been Palestine, and that the Jews or the Zionists were the ones that came in and invaded, and so on and so forth, which is utterly false, right? So again, they'll point to these events. They'll focus on Israel being officially recognized as a sovereign state back in 1949, again, as another starting point. So it's either one or the other. They're either going to go to World War I or World War II. The minute they mention the 20th century, you know what type of person you're dealing with. Someone who's cherry picking information, someone who's not going all the way back to the beginning, someone who's not giving you historical truth on a holistic level. They're only giving you bits and pieces, again, to drive their narrative. So that's pretty much how it is. So again, this is a false narrative, as we have, thousands of historical artifacts that prove that Israel was there way before the name Palestine was ever brought into mention or into an existence, right? The people of Israel have been in that area, going back thousands of years. Again, from documents to archaeological artifacts to even the Bible itself, as I expressed and explained in our prior video, right? All confirmed the land was called Israel for thousands of years, again, before the name Palestine ever came into existence. Although we don't have an exact year, but the Old Testament was written about 1600 to 400, completed by 400 BC. So you've got a good, it's been around for at least 3,000 years, right? Now, when we include the New Testament, right, it was written 1st century AD, so it's pretty clear that the Bible is called Israel, right? I believe Joshua chose that land because Jacob, right, was further named Jacob. So you've got the three patriarchs of the Hebrew Bible, right? You've got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob then becomes Israel later on. So Jacob starts out, his name means deceiver, if I'm not mistaken, if I recall correctly. And then what happens is, during the story, at some point, he wrestles with God and he wins. So there's metaphoric explanations and reasoning why that entire transition, which I'm not going to get to because that's getting into the weeds. But what happens is God renames Jacob to Israel, which means governed by God. So when you look at the Bible, there is no mention of Palestine, nor is there any mention of Islam. Why is that? Well, because Islam did not come into existence till around 536 AD, roughly. So if you exclude the Bible, archaeology proves the historical events within the Bible, and when you include records from other kingdoms, like the Roman conquest of the area, it all bears out from a historical point. So if the left is going to use origins as a factor to determine a right to the land, they are just unequivocally wrong in saying that Palestinians are the originals, right? And let's go ahead and get into our second video here, as I have an actual Muslim. I don't know what his background. I don't know if he's a professor, if he's a historian, but he states he himself, as a Muslim, is stating exactly what the Bible actually says. So let's take a look at that.
Mia Khalifa's misinformation on history.
Israel has only been a state since 1948. Palestine is thousands of years old.
I remember this guy. Jesus Christ, on a motorbike. Sorry, Mia, you are wrong. Israel is 3,000 years old, 75 years young. And this is not coming from a Jew, but from a proud Muslim. The prophets of God whom I believe in were Israelites. A significant number of these prophets disseminated their teachings in the land of Canaan, a land which Joshua ben Nun later renamed Israel. And then King David proclaimed Jerusalem as the nation's capital. Yes, Mia, it wasn't Donald J. Trump, it was King David. Even Jesus of Nazareth, Mia, called the land Israel in the Gospel of Matthew. The Roman Emperor Hadrian expelled Jews from Israel, erasing the name Judea. He supplanted it with the Roman Latin term Syria Palestina, which evolved into Palestine. Similarly, the city of Shechem was changed to Neapolis or Nablus, which means in Roman Latin, new city or new place. The Jewish people, dear Mia, are not foreign colonialists in the land of Israel. I wish you to inform your audience that Israelis and Palestinians ought to coexist peacefully, and that peace is the only way, not marring history or disseminating falsehoods. Please share this video as it may reach Mia and others, so that they know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
So this gentleman is confirming it. I wish there were more Muslims like him that would actually state truth and facts versus just going off of feelings, false narratives, like he said. I mean, honestly, the only way that we are going to get to peace, as this guy mentioned, is to have truth on the table, because if you have lies, it's just going to create more incorrect and inaccurate viewpoints, inaccurate feelings, and it's just going to exacerbate and continue to grow the negativity and the hatred that's engulfing that area right now, and it's spreading over into other areas, including our own country. But of course, this is all being done from a regional perspective, right? If we try to go by the religious perspective, right, as I mentioned before, they're going to try and claim that the land is theirs by attaching the claims of the Quran that the inheritance comes through the lineage of Ishmael, right? So again, you've got Abraham, who's the father of the faith, right? Judaism, Christianity acknowledge that, and then the Quran also confirms that he is, and through the Quran, right, we have that when Abraham, you got to keep in mind that Abraham's first son was Ishmael, but it was not the promised child by God according to the Bible. According to the Bible, they were promised a child of their own between him and his wife Sarah. But Sarah grew impatient in waiting for God's word to be fulfilled, so she comes up with an idea and tells Abraham, "Hey, how about you sleep with the maid, the maid who's from Egyptian origins, Hagar, and that way you get her pregnant, and then that way I can have a child, right?" So Abraham agrees to that, and it happens. And sure enough, Ishmael is born, but that is not the promised child. So as they're raising Ishmael, eventually Sarah does get pregnant. God's word is fulfilled, and it brings in Isaac. And now you've got the bitterness and the squabbling and the jealousy from Sarah. She then goes to Abraham, and it's like, who technically inherits your blessings? Who's going to be your heir? Right? This was a child promised to us by God. It's not going to be Ishmael, is it? And she actually grows to, based on how I interpret it and how I'm reading it, I think she has a disliking towards Ishmael because of the jealousy and so on and so forth. So she actually tells Abraham to send them away. Abraham is torn, doesn't know what to do because that's his son. I don't know what I would do. I don't even want to think about that because, Abraham, different times, different regions, different scenario, right? But anyhow, so God actually speaks to Abraham and comforts him and say, listen, that's your son, but that's not who I promised you. That was your plan. That was your thing that you guys did. I wasn't involved in that, right? So listen to your wife. Send him away. Send Hagar away. Don't worry about it. I'll make sure that he's okay. I'll bless him and make sure that he's, he grows up to be he just grows up and he'll be protected, right? He's not going to die, being killed as a young lad on the way and so on. That's how I get it when God tells him that, he'll bless him and protect them and so on and so forth, right? So that's exactly what happens. And so the Quran comes in and basically we don't know what happens to Ishmael after that. At least I can't recall if there's any history. The only thing I do remember is the Ishmaelites, the descendants of the Ishmael, eventually show up later on down the road, a couple of generations down the road, and they actually get into slave trading, and they actually manage to buy Joseph, and they sell him to the Egyptians, right? So that's the last that I remember of the Ishmaelites. But in the Quran, it gives us more detail from their storytelling that Hagar and Ishmael eventually travel down to Mecca, and Ibrahim meets them down there, and that's why Mecca is such a holy place for them, right? But here's the problem that I have. Again, and I sorted this out before, is that you've got the Old Testament, which is literally over 3,000 years old when it was written, right? And then you've got the Quran, which from this point on has about 2,500. So there's anywhere from a 1,500, 1,000 to maybe 2,000 year difference between when the Old Testament was written to when the Quran was written, right? So if they're injecting themselves in there, how do you validate that? How do you go back 2,000 years and say, this is true? We only have that guy's account. So it's really, really difficult to take that as a base when we already have not just the Bible that says so, but we have, again, thousands of artifacts, thousands of archaeological evidences to prove that the people of Israel were there, the Jews were there way before that. So again, and there's no way to do a DNA test to validate the claims of the Quran that yes, their lineage comes from Ishmael. It's very hard to do that at this juncture. But anyhow, so I can't really buy that, right? Now, as I mentioned before, right, the propaganda war, right? I showed you a video of an Israeli soldier's account of what he's seen. So what happens is there's a huge propaganda war, and we know this based on the things that we've gone through most recently with C-19, right? January 6th, et cetera, right? There's there's always misinformation that's coming out, right? The claims of Russian interference and so on and so forth, which in some part was, but the way that the media portrayed it was that it was in favor of Trump versus that they were just trying to cause dissent in both parties, and so on and so forth. But anyhow, so since these attacks have happened, right, we've gone enormous amount of information is coming in, right? From every, news organization to every political podcaster, as I'm an example of that, right? The information continues to get updated almost on an hourly basis. And here's where we are so far. Hamas launches thousands of rockets, overwhelming the Iron Dome, right? Killed over 1,000 civilians, kidnapped hundreds, killed a bunch. And almost immediately, Israel responds with bombing specific targets that their intelligence deems as Hamas targets, and has been preparing itself for a ground campaign into the Gaza Strip. Now, and that's in order to eliminate, Hamas. The tricky part here is that Hamas doesn't. We've already established that Hamas is not a government, right? They may have been elected, but a government doesn't do the things that these guys do. These guys are terrorists, right? And so if you want to couple the fact that they're a terrorist government, then we can do that. But they don't fight by typical means, right? They dress in civilian clothing, which, instead of uniforms, which is not, it shouldn't happen if you're talking about a government, right? They use their own people as human shields. Those types of reports came out back during the Obama administration, right?
There are two views of the Israeli military, what you hear in most of the media and the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth. I was the commander of British forces in Afghanistan. I have fought in combat zones around the world, including Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Macedonia and Iraq. I was also present throughout the conflict in Gaza in 2014. Based on my experience and on my observations, the Israel Defense Force, the IDF, does more to safeguard the rights of civilians in a combat zone than any other army in the history of warfare. The war was started by Hamas, the terror organization, designated as such by the US State Department that runs the Gaza Strip. In the first 6 months of 2014, Hamas launched hundreds of rockets at Israeli civilians. After repeated warnings from Israel to stop, the Israeli Air Force finally conducted precision strikes to halt the rocket fire, and the IDF advanced into Gaza to destroy a network of terror tunnels that Hamas had constructed to attack Israeli communities near the Gaza border. The IDF took extraordinary measures to give Gaza civilians notice of targeted areas, dropping millions of leaflets, broadcasting radio messages, sending texts, and making tens of thousands of phone calls. Let me repeat that. The Israelis called Gazans on their cell phones and told them to leave their residences and move to safety. Never in the history of warfare has an army phoned its enemy and told them where they're going to drop their bombs. Many IDF missions that could have taken out Hamas military capabilities were aborted to prevent civilian casualties, increasing the risk to Israeli citizens and soldiers. Despite all of this, of course innocent civilians were killed. Every war is chaotic and confusing, and mistakes are frequent. But mistakes are not war crimes. Hamas, on the other hand, committed war crimes as official government policy. Hamas deliberately positioned its military assets among the civilian population, hiding weapons in schools and hospitals, and placing rocket launchers alongside apartment buildings, then forced those civilians to stay in areas they knew would be attacked. They also instructed their people to report the lie that every Gazan killed was a civilian, even if they were actually fighters. And if there were no civilian deaths, Hamas made them up. Numerous internet sites show Palestinians elaborately staging sniper victims and smashed ambulances, among other phony horrors. It's so common, there's even a term for it, Pallywood, as in Palestinian Hollywood. Ironically, it's the leaders of Hamas themselves who best understand the extraordinary measures the IDF will take to protect innocent civilians.
They're very deceptive. And now with the increase of social media and all the stuff that we've seen that I mentioned just a little while ago, the illusion or the deception is in their favor. The ball's more so on their court when it comes to that as far as an advantage. So, during the 2014 confrontation, we just saw, at least I did, extremely similar tactics being used, right? So Hamas attacks Israel, Israel hits back, and everybody comes out and says Israel has a right to defend itself. Then the Palestinian casualties happen. They start to flood the internet, social media, the news, and it creates international outrage. Israel gets accused of wiping out or targeting Palestinian civilians. All of that was happening way back then, and it's happening once again. And so this pressure, right, that mounted on Bibi Netanyahu back then, right, was to stop the military campaign. Now, so due to media mistrust, Hamas supporters seem to be using this mistrust to their advantage by denying reports as misinformation. Given the current level of stupidity in our society, Hamas has picked an opportune moment, if you will, to deploy such a tactic. Whether it's done on purpose or not, it's working to their advantage, right? Reports have confirmed from many areas around the world people gathering in support of Hamas or Palestine. So startling but not shocking is the level of ignorance and hatred being displayed and getting justified that makes everything just completely bonkers to me, right? But here's our next video, and it's essentially Lawrence from Fox News going over to a local college in New York and interviewing, and I'm pretty sure, based on what I've been seeing in multiple videos, too many to put in here, that this is the sentiment, or this is the temperature around these college campuses. Let's take a look at that.
I've covered a lot of rallies, a lot of protests. I was all out of the street in the summer of love 2020. This is the worst I've ever seen. And it is the chance. We have gone from no justice, no peace, to open jihad. This is some of the comments we found yesterday.
Where'd you go?
You went to Hunter College.
Oh, Hunter
right?
College. Why are you here today?
Free Palestine. I stand with the Palestinian people unequivocally.
I support decolonization and liberation of Palestinian people and the end of a mass genocide in the Gaza Strip.
You're talking about the genocide of the kids being beheaded?
That's false. That is actually false.
When you see the kids that have been beheaded and the women that are raped, how do you feel about that?
I don't know where to start from that.
Israel is notorious for creating propaganda that sides their one-sided massacre against Palestinians.
That was already proven that didn't really happen. There was not verified.
Women did not get raped.
No. I've not seen any proof of that. If it did happen, I haven't seen it.
Like, they get attacked for no reason.
The children got attacked for no reason? The kids that were beheaded?
Beheaded? Yeah, apparently. Like, that's...
But they were Jewish kids.
Wait, Jewish kids?
The U.S. military money that goes there, $4 billion a year, should stop going to Israel to support their war crimes.
So there's two things that happened there. You have the kids that were there, that were indoctrinated, that were clueless to what was going on there. And then you had the other kids that were there that had masks that looked like jihadists, that looked like straight up jihadists because they didn't want their identity to be shown there. And they were openly spewing rhetoric that Hamas is saying.
So there's a number of things that we got out of that, right? The level of ignorance, right, from these college students, that hateful rhetoric, right? You know, the either lying or denial of reports. And one can say, well, they're anti-Fox, just like, you know, the right is anti-CNN. Here's the thing, though. CNN has been reporting, and MSNBC and NBC have been reporting similar things when it comes to the people, the actual victims from that event, right? They have, and I've seen many of those videos actually, where, you know, they're interviewing, you know, the families of those who are hostages, survivors from the event, and so on. So that's the you know, the interesting part. The other part of it was how there's just a lot of misinformation going on, and it's willful, right? They're either willfully ignoring it, and here's the thing, she, you know, the girl with the mask, she was like, well, I haven't seen it, right? Okay, number one, you're not going to see a woman getting raped. You can only go by accounts, right? You know, they're going to take that stuff down. But there have been reports where these terrorists have taken to some type of social media and have posted some events, and of course it gets taken down quickly. So you're not going to see it. Unfortunately, in this case, you're going to have to go by the testimonies of the family members, the survivors, etc., right? You know, you got to kind of use your brain here a little bit. Now, the propaganda machine, though, doesn't just stop with the left, right? And the tricky part with the left is that, you know, I point out CNN, MSNBC, they can watch their own shows that they cling to, right, when it comes to political discourse. So they're showing it too. But here's the tricky part. It's also hit the conservatives, right? The propaganda machine has hit the conservatives. So it's managed to confuse conservatives, right? So the denial of babies being beheaded is one example. I read it from a pretty vocal political person on the right. I can't remember the person's name. And my brother-in-law and I were having my brother-in-law Saul, right, who started this channel with me. You know, he even talked about, you know, the accounts where, you know, he even told me, you know, those reports got dismissed. I'm like, well, I haven't seen them dismissed. First of all, let's think about this, right? I mean, it's true. I haven't seen any images, but again, I need to ask the question: do we really want to see images of babies beheaded? Right? Are we really going to give terrorists the benefit of the doubt when it's undisputed that they've kidnapped and killed and celebrated a musical event promoting peace? I mean, videos of the aftermath into small villages where their carnage is fully visible are undeniable, right? There's accounts where they threw grenades into, so apparently, and I couldn't find this particular video. It was a survivor, and he accounts how, you know, people scattered. Some people went into, like, behind trees, and they wouldn't move for 12 hours until, you know, they were found, or some of them were eventually found and killed by the terrorists. But when they originally heard the sirens go off, they went into these bunkers, right? And so the terrorists, according to his account, the terrorists actually ended up throwing grenades. They managed to get into those bunkers and throw grenades in the bunkers themselves to the survivors, right? So I mean, I don't understand why we're questioning, you know, and kind of like giving benefit of the doubt to a group of terrorists. That just boggles my mind. So I explained to my brother-in-law, it's like, wait a minute, you know, where's the proof and the evidence that it isn't, right? There was another account of this was tragic. Actually, my wife brought this one to me, where right before the attacks, his parents, they apparently had a bunker, and they or some type of shelter, and they managed to get their 10-month-old twins into that bunker right before the terrorist attack. Either they threw a grenade, or I'm not sure if they just opened fired. The sad part is that the parents did not make it to safety. and they died. And so the IDF, I guess, found the kids, from what I understood in the report, like 10 hours later, something like that. And thankfully, they were alive. And my wife and I, we looked at each other and it goes, you know what, we would totally adopt those two twins now that they don't have any parents. And it's stuff like that it's really heartbreaking. So when I hear stuff like that and I see the pictures, because they actually showed the pictures of the parents, it's like, why I don't understand. Are we becoming, like, I get it. You know, you can't trust and you question everything. That's my mom, question everything. But I mean, are we really going to question things that you know, come out of a terrorist group, right? That claim they didn't do this or this didn't happen? I would, you know, and every government is corrupt, don't get me wrong. But I would rather side with a legitimate government, a legitimate democratic government, versus siding with terrorists and doubting the government and taking, you know, giving the terrorists a plausibility. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But let's go ahead and get into the second video of the survivors.
This is the town of Be'eri, 4 kilometers from the border with Gaza. The terrorists were here exactly a week ago. The damage is still here now. The bodies have been taken away, most of them, but this is a scene of great devastation. We've just been told by an Israeli commander how soldiers from the Israeli Defense Force fought to the death here. There's still evidence of this, bullet casings all over the floor, burned out cars, burned out military vehicles, which Hamas managed to attack as the Israelis fled. But many more Israelis piled in and fought back and drove them out. That's the case in 27 kibbutz communities, which were all cleared of the terrorists within 24 hours. But this area remains extremely tense. We were told that inside the property, the dead included 8 babies. They were all killed and their bodies burned. The commander who we've just spoken to said, this appears to be a Hamas calling card. He just said, we followed the fires. Wherever there was a fire, there were bodies that had been burned.
So, I mean, it's really tragic. I mean, I don't need to see the bodies, because I think from 9/11, we know what these people are capable of doing. So why would we question that is beyond me. And I said it before on this channel, when the right and the left both report the same thing or similar things, it's a high probability that there's truth and accuracy behind it. It's when they don't line up that, you know, it causes the harsh scrutiny and understandable skepticism. But I mean, how far of a society have we gone away from common sense that we will question a legitimate government, but, you know, but believe or defend a totalitarian terrorist group? It just doesn't make sense, right? So moving on, right? The left's support, or the left's, there's a pocket of support from the left, as we saw in Lawrence's video, and there's a pocket that doesn't support it, which is really fascinating and interesting from a political point of view, right? The left seems really split on this situation. Now, it's no secret that the Jewish community in this country are Democrats by a good margin. Many of them, you know, stood by democratic policies such as defund the police and, you know, gave their support towards BLM. It's interesting but not shocking that, you know, BLM would support Hamas, right?
Weird. For more on this, let's bring in former Black Lives Matter activist and current PragerU personality, Xavier DeRusso. Xavier, good to see you. So listen, break this down for us, because a lot of us are confused by this coalition of the radical left and radical Islam. What's going on here?
I saw this coming a mile away. The radical left and Muslim extremists have different ideologies, but they have very similar approaches. First of all, they both bank on media manipulation and people's miseducation of history in order to convince people that they are the victims when really they are the aggressors. Then they use hatred and anarchy to force people to comply with their beliefs and their way of life. Yet they are clearly just the worst people to be aligned with. You have groups like Black Lives Matter who would love to showcase the same level of destruction here in the US as Hamas is over in Israel. And then you have these radical LGBT groups shouting queers for Palestine as if Hamas wouldn't behead them the second they start singing a Madonna song. These people shout their cries of oppression from a mountain of lies, and quite frankly, it's pathetic.
The Chicago chapter shared an image of a paratrooper with a Palestinian flag over it. Now, I want to point out these people are masters of deception and confusion. Now, the massive debate here comes with the mixing of Hamas and which is a terrorist group, and that with the average Palestinian civilian. One can argue that they are not the same, and that this image blurs the line intentionally or unintentionally, depending on your perspective. The Palestinian flag represents the Palestinian people, but the paratrooper who opened fire on the civilians is clearly a Hamas terrorist. This is the part of the propaganda machine we just finished discussing, right? So due to this, the leftist Jewish community is left there alone, being criticized and unsupported by their fellow leftists, right? So to their credit, many Democrats, such as like Mayor Adams and Governor Hochul, have publicly acknowledged their disgust or disapproval of the supportive protest towards Hamas. The interesting part of all this is the left's typical contradiction and double standards, right? One would think that BLM, given their frequent shouts of racism and the usage of slavery to further their racist narrative, which they have similar pasts with the Jews, right? You'd think that they would be supportive of the land of Israel and the Jewish people, right? I mean, both sides have a proven history of racism towards their community, and both people have endured hundreds of years of slavery. I mean, Jews have been persecuted so much that they have their own term of racism, which is anti-Semitism, right? So you would think that there would be some type of sympathy, but that's not what happened. They decided to align themselves with a terroristic group who portrays the people of Israel as oppressors, right? And that's the key thing, like I mentioned in the prior video, is that there's this whole thing of victimhood mentality that just draws support, right? But thankfully, not all leftists, side. Like I said, there's a split here, and you have people like Bill Maher, who are openly, he calls balls and strikes. I think when it comes to Trump, he has TDS, but when it comes to this particular issue, he's a straight shooter. Let's watch his video.
And we will talk about the history. I just want to finish with the values first, because it's just amazing to me that the American left, so much of it, throws their lot in with people whose values, I hope they don't share, but let's go through them. Because values and customs make a difference, okay? And the people of Gaza, by the way, if the Israelis did get rid of Hamas, they'd be doing a giant favor to the people of Gaza who hate Hamas too. But let's just go through the lists. Because the Israelis look like us in most ways, values-wise. Maybe we're not doing it the right way. I don't know. Religious tolerance. That doesn't exist in Gaza. You're either Muslim or an infidel, and you better be a Muslim. Female freedom. Free and fair elections. Free speech. Gay rights. I see these Queers for Palestine.
Did you hear their sister organization, Blacks for the KKK?
It's like...
By the way, I'm a gay man. I've lived in Berlin. This is a level of masochism that even I cannot comprehend.
Right. I mean...
You know what? I'm going to just...
can I just finish my list? Pedophilia. I'll put that under don't ask. Child brides and so forth. Equality of the sexes. I'll categorize that under don't make me fucking laugh. The fact that, these people think that this is where they should be aligned with, that these are the values that you support?
I think this past week has been a real important moment for a moral reckoning on the American left. Because there is a small, and I'm going to emphasize that, a very small but growing and extremely loud faction on the American left that has revealed itself.
I don't know how small anymore.
Okay, well, I mean...
it was all over.
So there you have it. Thankfully, not everybody's lock in step when it comes to the left regarding this particular situation. But, again, it's hard to understand the left when the things that they advocate for groups like Hamas don't, and yet they support Hamas. It's a conundrum, right? It's a problem with the matrix, if you will, right? And so thankfully Bill calls it out the way that he does. Their values just don't align. So it's a puzzler it's a head scratcher why these people are supporting it. But I think it's the victim mentality, right? I think maybe there's certain parts of the left that think that Israel and the Jews are white. They're closer to white supremacists and the Palestinians are more of people of color, and so that's where the support comes from. But then they'll shift and they'll tell you that Jesus was a person of color. Jesus was a Jew. So are Jews white or are Jews people of color? Right? And then you could make the argument, well, a lot of them went to Europe and came back and so on and so forth. Okay, but they're still Jew and they're still their lineage is still from that area. They're still Middle Eastern. They're still people of color, right? If Barack Obama's half black and half white, and yet they ignore the white side and he's just regular old black, then doesn't matter if you're half Jew, half European. You should be all Jew. No, I mean, if you're picking and choosing which side you wanna lean towards, right? So again, it's just the hypocrisy from these people is on full blast here, right? It's to another level.